All right, we'll call tonight's meeting to order and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. AJ, don't sit down.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Start this evening with the approval of tonight's agenda.
I move the board approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
And Denise, when you are ready.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Let's have some fun with honoring excellence. Dallas.
Yes, we will indeed have some fun, as it's somewhat championship night here as part of honoring excellence. We're going to introduce you to some state champions here in just a moment, but I did want to first take you back, if I can advance it. There we go. Real quick, just wanted to share, we had a great day over at Liberty High School this last Friday as part of our LPS Winter Open House. It was an in-person event for the first time in 3 years, and as you can see on the screen, 17 performances from groups from all around the district, over 700 students participating. I want to give a big thanks to Aaron Money and the Fine Arts Department, and I know several in the room attended, and we were just blown away by the turnout from families. We had several hundred folks that attended, and it was just great to see everybody. And the bonus for us is we will be sharing those on our social media platforms. They're going to be queued up, ready to go tomorrow to share many of performance over the course of the next few weeks. So just wanted to make mention of that before we jumped into honoring excellence tonight. And we first want to introduce you to Ethan Burnham. I met Ethan walking in. Ethan, would you want to join me here? Oh, there you are. Ethan, we always introduce our National Merit semifinalists, and Ethan was our lone National Merit semifinalist in LPS this year. Huge deal. I'll read just a little bit of the release here. We want to join Liberty High School in recognizing Ethan Burnham, son of Brian and Meredith Burnham, who are with us here this evening, for qualifying as a semifinalist in the National Merit Scholarship Program. It's a highly competitive academic competition students qualify for by taking the PSAT, NMSQT test during their junior year. Ethan has the opportunity to continue in the competition to become a National Merit finalist, which includes several requirements to advance. So regardless of what the future holds with that, congratulations again, Ethan, and we will present you with a certificate. Good job. Ian Everett, join me at the podium, please. Ian, in the back of the room. Thanks for being here this evening, and I'll read the release on Mr. Everett. On November 11th, Ian claimed the individual state championship in the 100-meter freestyle at the Missouri State Swim and Dive Championships. In the final, he broke his own record in the prelims with a time of 44.76. With the win, Ian is the 100-meter freestyle back-to-back state champion, as he also claimed the event in 2021. In addition to the 100 freestyle win, Ian was runner-up in the 200 freestyle at the state championships. It should also be noted that Ian's times in both the 100 and 200 are good enough to be high school All-American times as released by the NISCA, which stands for National Interscholastic Swim Coaches Association. We also want to congratulate the entire Blue Jay men's team as they finished 8th place as a team and have now placed in the top 10 at state for 7 straight years. Quite an accomplishment. So congratulations to Coach Murphy and the entire Blue Jay program. But tonight we want to present Ian Everett with an honoring excellence certificate. Congratulations. Next, we want to congratulate, I somewhat dropped the ball on our graphics here. Advance, please. There's Ian. And there is our Liberty North boys cross country state champs. Coach Chatlos, would you join me at the podium, please? I know you're shy. Old Chatty, we've known each other a few years. Long time. The Liberty North High School boys cross country team traveled to Columbia, Missouri to compete in the MSHA Class 5 state championships on Friday, November 4th. When the dust had settled, the Eagles had gathered enough team points to claim the Missouri Class 5 team state championship. Adding to the memorable day of action, Liberty North also claimed the individual state championship. I guess this would be the time we should have Sage join us here at the podium. Sage Wilde. He claimed the individual state championship in Columbia as he dominated the field of runners, leading from the opening gun to the finishing tape and finishing with the winning time of 15:05. Sage, I don't think I could run a race at 15:05. I'm going to go out on a limb.
That's a mile time for us.
That's exactly right. Following a third-place finish for the Eagle boys in 2021, they seemed poised for at least a runner-up finish in 2022, but a huge push in the final kilometer of the race is what it took. And I'm going to have Coach Chatlos. I know there's other members of this unbelievable team with us tonight. I thought you'd go ahead and introduce the athletes here this evening.
Sure. So we had Sage Wilde, who was the individual champion. Grayson Tapp couldn't be here, but he was 11th place. Colin Kleiman, who couldn't be here, was in 22nd place. Next was Jorge Perez. Come on up, Jorge. Jorge was 27th, I think. Is that right? Yeah. 27th. Then Caden Kleiman was next, who had a basketball game. Then Sean Porker. Come on up. Maybe line up over here. And Asher Kerp. Come on up. So this was our team. We won state, but we also have a couple of our alternates because they're part of the team too. Ben Thompson, senior, is also one of our alternates, and Ishinesu and Zira Masanga, freshman. Come on up. And we also wouldn't be where we are if it wasn't for our coaches. So Brian Kerp and Marie Gegline are also here. Come on, yeah, come on.
Fantastic. Let's give them a round of applause. Sage, for your individual state championship, a certificate, and for the rest of the team, there's a team certificate for the Eagles. And I think one other thing to make mention of that we shared with the community is as they prepared for the state meet, the fact that we had both Liberty High boys and girls and Liberty North boys and girls programs qualify for the state meet, which is just that's a hashtag LPS leads moment right there, I would say. So pretty neat. So Mr. Barlow, I'm going to turn it over to you because I know we have a tradition, and then I'm going to step away from the podium. But I just want to wish everyone a happy holiday and a happy New Year 2023.
Thank you, Dallas. We do have a tradition here. The state champions, Ian, this is for you as well, but we give a standing ovation as a board on the accomplishment. So congratulations. All right, we're going to take a few minutes because I know the board would love to interact and congratulate you in person. So we'll take about, 10 minutes maybe. Go out and greet, say congratulations personally, and then come back to the meeting.
Oh, good.
All right, I failed to ask about public comment before we broke, so if there's anybody here for public comment that has not handed a blue card to Denise, do so now. All right.
Everybody learned.
All right, moving into
Here's all the fun stuff.
into consent agenda. Just a reminder, adopted rules of parliamentary procedure. Robert's rules provide for a consent agenda listing several items for an approval by the board through a single motion. Documentation concerning all of these items has been provided to all board members and the public in advance to assure an extensive and thorough review. Items may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of any board member. Do I have a motion?
I move the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 to 3.06.
Second.
And Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Awesome. Reports from the administration, starting with innovation and learning.
We'll turn it over to Dr. Moore to provide an update on the Innovation and Learning Department.
Good evening. We just have a short few items. Dallas mentioned it, but Dr. Westphal and I wanted to thank our Fine Arts Department again for the amazing showcase that was put on last Friday. It was an incredible display of talent. Liberty North Orchestra and Band are preparing for their upcoming performance at the Missouri State Music Conference in January. Heritage Middle School Choir will be performing at the National American Choral Directors Association in Cincinnati, Ohio. This is the first time Liberty Schools is having a vocal group represent the district at the national level, so congratulations to them. A couple more. We wanted to do a little bit of honoring excellence ourselves because we like that, especially in December. We wanted to recognize Ashley Mullen, volleyball player at Liberty High School, and Blake Craig, football player at Liberty North High School. Both were selected to play in the Under Armour All-American Games for their respective sports, which will be held in the next couple of weeks. It highlights some of the best athletes across the country. Both have also graduated early and are going to be headed to college here in the next few days. Wow. Ashley will be attending UCLA to play volleyball, and Blake will be headed to Mizzou, go black and gold, starting in January. We wish them the best of luck as well. We're starting the hiring process of summer school. Administrators have been placed and notified as of today. Our next focus will be on the hiring of teachers the first week of February, and then parents can start enrolling students on February 8th, so that is right around the corner. We are currently completing round 2 of iReady testing in both math and reading. As we head into second semester, we'll start looking at this data for growth and areas to focus on for improvement. And this is a lot of the work, just so you know, that takes place on early release Wednesdays, where teachers are taking that data and analyzing it to see how our students are doing and what we can do to help them improve. And then finally, I am very excited to share that we have 2 more students in our early college academy who will graduate at semester with an associate's degree. So thank you to all of you for approving that just a few short years ago. We have one student from Liberty North and one student from Liberty High who have earned the associate's degree this December. And we've had a few in the last year, I want to say maybe 2. So that's a total of 4 in 3 years that we've had this program. So thank you again for supporting that. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Just a comment in recognition of voters, approving that Children's Services Fund. I continue to be thankful that we're able to fill these open positions. I know we've got one starting from an in-school therapy standpoint at South Valley and Liberty North. I think it's great that we're able to find these folks and bring them in and have that funding to support that. So
they've been a wonderful asset to our students and to staff as well.
Lots going on, Dr. Moore.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr.
All right,
Moore.
thank you.
4.02 then, as far as our Office of Equity, we'll welcome Dr. Dixon Seahorn to the podium.
Good evening, everybody. I just have 2 things that I want to highlight. The first is in reference to the amended contract with the Core Collaborative, which was part of the consent agenda items. I want to just thank you for your support of our continued work with the Core Collaborative, who are our Equity PD partners. The work that we're doing aligns with key components that we've outlined in the Equity in Schools grant for year 1 implementation. This is year 1. And the expanded PD opportunity will allow us to add 2 facilitators in person in our upcoming February PD session. That's during DLT, as well as we'll be able to add a lead facilitator in person for a follow-up session that we're going to have in March with our operations and academic directors in March of 2023. So just know that we're putting the money to work. I want to thank you for your support of that item. And then the other thing I wanted to share is about the annual report, which is the other item that you see for the Office of Equity. And it is basically just sharing with you updates and progress that we've made for the calendar year 2022. And at this point, I'll just take any questions or hear any comments that you might have in reference to those 2 reports for this month.
As always, I love the first page, and I really enjoyed the action-packed year. And because you guys have been very busy, and there has been lots of things going on, and it's nice to look at that retrospective and see all the things that we've done, because sometimes I feel like we forget, because it just adds one thing to another to another. So
thank you.
Nice first page, as always.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, to layer it on top of that, knowing that grant that came from the Kauffman Foundation and seeing it bulleted out in that annual report reminds me of all those things that you've been able to bring to the table to leverage those dollars, and appreciate you and the team continuing to do that.
Thank you so much for that.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Looking at that report on that first page, related to, I think it's developing a belonging assessment tool to measure LPS staff professional growth on principles of belonging and disposition of dignity. What is that what might that look like?
I can't give you all the details on it now, because that is something that we're going to focus on for year 2 of implementation. But our idea around it is, how can we kind of circle back on the other side of the work we've been doing thus far to figure out what people are learning from the experiences and how it's really informing, in particular, classroom teaching practices.
Okay.
So that is something that I'm going to work with Christopher Hand on, since he is our Director of Assessment and Research and Evaluation. And we're going to partner with the Core Collaborative on what that tool could look like. It's going to be custom designed. So I don't have all the answers for you now, but that is definitely what our thinking is, that by the time we get into this next year, we need to kind of go back and assess the learning experiences that our staff are having.
Well, I'm excited about it, because there's several of these that really catch my attention that are powerful tools. Once they're designed, they can really, like the student-to-teacher impact sessions. I think that's very valuable. So I'm excited about getting into year 2.
Absolutely.
So thank you for this. Thank you for being specific about it. I appreciate it.
Anything else for Dr. Dixon Seahorn?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up then on agenda item 4.03, Ms. Cindy Sullivan with our finance report.
Good evening. I have 2 donations to recognize for you tonight. Excuse me, a monetary donation of $3,000 to Liberty High School from Kissick Construction. That will be used to purchase a CNC router and accessories. This donation is given in memory of Kissick employee and friend John Garvey, who is the father of 4 Liberty Public School students, Jackson, Morgan, Benjamin, and Marie. Thank them for that thoughtful donation in Mr. Garvey's memory. And also, we had a monetary donation of $500 from Michael and Mandy Fangman to the Counselor Care Team Fund at Lewis and Clark. And that will be used for counseling supplies and family assistance. So we'd like to thank the Fangman family also. In addition to my report, a couple of things to note for you. We did issue a request for proposals for audit services last week. So we will be receiving those proposals through the middle of January, then working through whatever we receive to do interviews and bring a recommendation for an auditor for the next few years to you sometime in the spring. So that's on our horizon. We've also been working with one of our investment partners to take our cash flow, which we provide to you in our report every month, and break that a little more down to a weekly look instead of the monthly look that we traditionally do, to get it a little bit more granular so that we can take advantage of rates, interest rates that are seeming to still go up, and we will get the bulk of our money in January from our assessments. So we're trying to plan out and be very diligent to recoup as much interest on those funds to the possibilities that we've not done before. So we're looking to maximize interest there. So that's been a fun little project to work on with our investment partners. So I wanted to mention that to you. The Audit and Finance Committee did review documents, had a couple of questions about a couple of things for me, but nothing to pass on to you. That's all I've got for my report tonight. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
I don't have any questions, I just have a comment. I'm sure that I have known this at some point in the past, but for some reason it really stuck out to me, the size of the staff that you work with,
Yes.
which is pretty slim
Yes.
to support the organization and the functions you do with 8 people.
Yes, it is.
So I just appreciated you pointing that out, because it kind of just illuminated for
Thank
me
you.
the amount of work that's going on.
They're high functioning and a great team, and they work well.
Small but mighty.
Thank you.
And a nicely done annual report.
Thank you.
Short, sweet, to the point, very succinct.
That's kind of how I work.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan.
Thank you.
4.04 then is our operations report, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Stephen Anderson.
Thank you. Just a couple things for tonight. First, I wanted to pull one item out of the operations report, and it's the purchasing portal. If you notice that, it's something we've been working on for a little time, and Jason Bright with purchasing and distribution is taking the lead, working with technology, and Ms. Sullivan as well, and her team's been very involved. And it's really to formalize kind of an approval workflow for major purchases, making sure that we're being completely compliant, and then tying it into kind of the auditing side of things so that there's a more defined paper trail that's kept and trapped within our systems. That'll also have some interface with Keystone as well. So that's not quite ready to launch yet, but we're getting pretty close, and I think that's going to make some really good strides just to ensure that all of our purchasing actions that happen across the district are completely compliant. So that's one item. The other is, if you may notice in some of the department reports, a quick update on hiring and retention. I will say, and again, we're appreciative certainly of the board approving back about 6 months ago some adjustments to a few positions on the operations side. We're really seeing the benefit of that, and it took a little bit of time to kind of get into the system. But we're seeing fewer openings, we're still seeing some good turnover, and that's just part of the natural run of the department. But we're seeing fewer openings, which is great. Again, the benefits of that are really significant in terms of custodial and cleaning to nutrition services and serving and moving kids through the system. And Kids Zone, which we're able to bring more and more families off the wait list. And so again, thank you for that work, and it really made a big difference across the board for our folks. And I'd be remiss if I didn't call out and thank specifically Christelle Morgan, Dr. Frost, and Kelly Baker, and just all the work that they're just constantly kind of helping our team as we're hiring and retaining folks on operations. And so with that, take any questions if you have them.
I don't have a question, but your report really stood out for me this month. Just looking at the interactions, I mean, this is operations, so it's not directly always impacting students, but these groups do. And seeing in your report that we have people on your team that are delivering 600 boxes of food collected by our students to, where was it that they delivered it to? I'm forgetting the name of the place, but delivering food for the food banks, and health department partnering, or the health team, our health services team partnering with Northland CAP students to present, health information on fentanyl abuse to our students. Thinking about our nutrition services team and using student employees, Kids Zone using student employees, so they're getting valuable work experience. And then the pet project that Kids Zone was using there's just so much learning that happens in the interactions between the operations groups and our students, and I think it's really nice to see. And I will also share on a personal note, I was at the Lewis and Clark party, holiday winter party today, and to see some of the custodial staff at Lewis and Clark seeking out kids who maybe didn't have a friend to take a picture with or to hang out with was really incredible to see. So these are people that are in our buildings doing good things for students, and so I just hope that they all know how much they're appreciated by the board.
Well, thank you for that. Appreciate that. Well, I will pass that along.
Mm-hmm.
There's two other things I'll pull out, is just acknowledging a couple of things. One, we don't see, to Karen's point, everything that happens in the background, and I noticed on facilities and grounds, the simple act of performing carbon monoxide testing, right? Critical.
Yes.
We don't all think about it. I don't perform carbon monoxide testing on my furnace, right? So I know that's not at the top of my mind, but the fact that we're doing that, you guys have a process in place, and I know there's more examples of that in facilities and grounds, which really appreciate. The other thing that just blew my mind, the number of nursing visits that happen on a monthly basis is over 15,000 each month. So it's not like we're all of a sudden ramping up towards an illness season. This is just 15,000 kids come to the nurse's office every month. I'm blown away by that number. It's
busy place.
amazing that they're busy, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
And to add to that, just out of curiosity, because I don't know that I've paid attention to this part before, 313 work orders in a month, is that typical? Is that that seems like, that's a lot of work.
What department?
I've got it under facilities and grounds.
So, well, because we're tagging in, but yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Sorry, facilities and grounds has a lot of stuff
They
going on.
do, yeah, I think that's probably, tech has a lot as well, but I think that's probably, and it's a way to trap all the work as well and to organize it, prioritize it, but, yeah, I know there's a lot in queue as well, right, because they stack
Right.
up and they're constantly prioritizing them, but,
And-
that sounds about right.
But for all the buildings that we have, maybe it's not as many as it sounds like, but goodness gracious.
Yeah.
They're busy.
A little over 2 million square feet of space across the district. Just a lot
Is that
of.
a, that's a massive amount.
Yeah. About 5 or 600 acres. Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Well, thanks, Mr. Anderson.
Got just a comment, I guess, or maybe a question. In our consent agenda, we approved MKEC to continue services that would lead into some of the bond work that we're going to be talking about later. But they're wrapping up their current contract, is how I read that.
Right.
And when does that old contract end, and when does the new one formally start?
I can't remember off the top of my head, but I think it just transitions. We may have even done a month extension on the existing agreement, which we were able to do.
So, but it should be seamless, I guess, as far as
yeah.
what you're doing and setting priorities of what you've been doing and then rolling into what hopefully we will be doing. That should provide us good momentum.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
and really I think that the same team as well, which is always
Right.
helpful. You can appreciate that with the civil engineering background, but so it's the same team, and they're already kind of been engaged in some of the conversations that we're having.
Okay.
Yeah.
Keep them coming. Anything else for Mr. Anderson?
Should we make one up?
Who hasn't asked him a question?
It's like back in law school.
I haven't. I don't have
Thanks,
questions.
You're
Mr.
on the hot
Anderson.
seat.
4.05, Dr. Frost is not here this evening, but the department has submitted their report, and Mr. D. Rosecrans has assured me he can answer any questions that you might have in and around the human resources report this evening. So we present that to you for an update. Any questions of the HR team, or more specifically D?
First of all, thank you for the timeline for the Grow Your Own Teachers. That's exciting to have that whole thing laid out there. And I'm excited, for May when they get presented to the board. That will be.
Best kept secret until then.
Well, okay. Can't we apply something out there?
I do also just have a comment about some of the retirements that we're seeing come along at this time of year. It's always a little bit bittersweet to see people deciding to move along, but excited for their next phase in the journey. But D, your work is cut out for you.
Yes, and this is probably, I wouldn't say the tip of the iceberg, but if you put your ear to the rail, there's probably some more coming down.
big shoes to fill, for sure.
Thanks for that foreshadowing.
And opportunities to celebrate.
That's what it's
Recognize
it's
Right,
jobs well
as we
done.
get into the spring semester. so.
another phase in the journey of life.
Absolutely.
Well, and I would say just with the fun that we've been having with staffing, it was good to see all teacher positions filled and some of the, some of the work there. So we'll keep our fingers crossed, hold our breath, knock on wood. And,
Yeah.
but very exciting.
We appreciate the board's support.
Thanks, Mr. Rosecrans. Last up then, in respect to reports from administration, is 4.06. A couple of items to point out, to highlight in my report this evening for you. One of the things that we've been talking about with the Department of Innovation and Learning is taking our graduate profile to kind of the next phase, and that is really in the development of rubrics as it relates to both from a teaching and a learning perspective. What do we mean by those skills and dispositions as it relates to a teacher instructing those particular areas, but then at the same time, from a learning standpoint, what does that mean for the learner, whether it's a pre-K, elementary, middle school, or high school student, that then is applying those skills and dispositions to their content, but then also engaging in real-world learning experiences for the demonstration of those skills and dispositions. So we've had a couple of early conversations with companies that do that type of work, and as we enter into the spring semester, it would be our hope, ideally, fingers crossed, as I look to Dr. Moore and Dr. Westfall, to be able to have those rubrics for consideration as we enter in the 23-24 school year. That is really the heavier lift. The front piece was really soliciting from our community their thoughts in and around the creation of that graduate profile, which we did a couple of years ago, and we're starting to see that come to fruition as it plays out in our classrooms. Another item that I wanted to mention was in respect to the Missouri Legislators Retreat that was held just a couple of weeks ago. This is, I believe, the second year that they have done this in collaboration with the Hunt Institute as a facilitator. And so we were invited as a district to participate in two panels, one panel on competency-based education and then another one on workforce development. But among the topics that were covered over that two-day period, topics included early childhood literacy, parent and family engagement, competency-based learning, educator workforce, accountability, and then post-secondary attainment. All legislators were invited to participate. They had close to 40 or 50 that participated over that two-day period. Competing interests as far as onboarding of new legislators and some caucus meetings were taking place, but it was good to connect with our area legislators, but as well as a few other districts that were invited to participate. Dallas mentioned the communications department working on the winter open house. Appreciate all of the work in coordinating that, as well as several of our board members that were able to stop by for a portion of that. So be sure to take a look at that online over the winter break as it relates to those 17 school performances. We also hosted our Coffee with the Community. I appreciate Dallas and his department for coordinating that for first semester. Mr. Nelson was here on December 15th providing an overview of facility master planning, which we'll hear about in a little bit, but that's also available online for everyone's viewing. Lastly, as we gear up for the start of the legislative session, we are already starting to see quite a few bills filed in the Senate as well as the House of Representatives as it relates to topics of conversation that will likely navigate the session this spring. We are working on legislative open house in collaboration with cooperating school districts as they do annually in the winter. That's coming up in January, so I know Denise will get that information out for board members that are able to attend, as well as extending invitations to our area senators and representatives for them to attend on our behalf. So with that said, we'll certainly open up for any questions you all have of me this evening.
Sounds like crickets.
Roll a question down,
I guess.
Okay. Nothing else into unfinished business, starting with facilities master plan.
5.01 is our facilities master plan, and I was told earlier that it's about 180 pages.
Yes.
And I believe we have a condensed slide deck from Mr. Nelson. So we've been working on this over the course of the last couple of years. And just as we wrap up the projects associated with the bond issue, we go back to the drawing board in consideration of what's next, coupled with a couple of additional pieces, the facility master planning piece, the demographic studies and projections that we conduct then also taking a look at our financing as it relates to our debt service. So we're going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson, who has, I believe, the final draft of our facilities master plan for your consideration this evening.
Page 1.
Page 1. Well, good to see everyone.
It's a great
tonight.
picture on page 1.
Should recognize the picture, exactly. So yeah, we started this process back in April of 21. So it's been a few months since we got started, and as Dr. Tucker said, this is a pretty long document. We're not going to go through the whole thing tonight, because it's all stuff you guys have seen and heard about over the past several months. So but we are wanting to just kind of summarize real quick. So these first 2 pages, just showing you, remember we've talked about the 5 steps and what went into those and how we made a plan. We worked to collect the data of what we had to work with. We worked really hard to create those planning criteria on what are our priorities going forward with the plan. That's step 4. We were exploring options, leaving no stone unturned to figure out what's the best option going forward. And then finally, here's step 5, where we're at, is really adopting that plan. And so this document just starts to summarize all of those activities. We have the planning criteria in here. Again, just listing what those criteria are. This is all the way from technology to security, all the way to school size. So if and when in the future we decide we need to plan a new school, we've already talked about what we think that school size should be going forward.
And informed by conversation with the community, internal, everything. Right?
Yes, absolutely. Informed by all of that stakeholder engagement that we did throughout the process, whether that be parent staff surveys, meeting with students, working with the administration team, those community forums. Again, all of this kind of layered in and built upon to create this plan. We also talked about what it meant to take the demographer's report and overlay that with the diagram of the district. So here you have kind of the current state when we did this last year, and then forecasting to about 2032 and kind of what that looks like. And so really what that showed us in this picture is that enrollment's maybe going to taper off a little bit, and so capacity is not our concern, considering the current demographer's report. Now again, we have to continue to watch that going forward as things can change pretty quickly as far as development or other economic conditions happen, but for the time being, that's how we're planning, is with that demographer's report showing that we don't need to worry about additional capacity. So that's what those diagrams show us. And then just to kind of reiterate that, this flashpoint diagram shows us if and when students come, when we would start to look at additional buildings. And so you'll see we still have kind of the triangles and the squares and the circles that represent the different levels of grades. Not until we get to over 14,000 students do we need that next elementary. A little bit beyond that for middle school, and then all the way up into the 16,000 student range before we would really be looking at that third high school. So we're a ways out before we need to talk about additional buildings. And so again, that really helped us focus this current master plan on more of our current facilities and programs. The last couple meetings we've been meeting with you, we brought with you a couple options on what a package of projects for a potential bond could look like, option A through D here. And those are things that we've kind of talked through with you as a group and kind of presented different pros and cons and different ways to kind of look at that bond project. Last time we were with you, we also brought together a staff recommendation about option B. Option B included $120 million total, 20 of which would be for that restructuring of the debt, focusing on safety, security, accessibility, student learning enhancements, as well as a big focus on operational efficiencies. Again, this is a zero tax increase bond that would be looking at, and the work, there's a lot of work that goes into $100 million worth of work. So 3 to 5 years, phasing that between design and construction. Again, a lot of phasing will happen just to try to work around students in these buildings that we're occupying while we're doing work. The image on the right there is just that list of projects. Again, it's hard to read on the screen, but those were the final projects that met in that SAP option B. So again, we're not going to go through the long appendix of all the pages of the demographer's report. There is facility assessments within the appendix as well for each facility, as well as some survey results from the process as well. So that kind of what makes up the 100+ pages of the document. Tonight, I think we're looking for potentially that approval of the master plan.
if I could just jump in real quick, and I think this obviously formalizes, or would formalize if approved, kind of the work over the past 20 months. It really locks in this last step, which identifies the projects, which then inform the next issue on the agenda, which is separate but obviously associated with this. That would be the ballot language for a potential bond issue in April.
Questions of Mr. Nelson or Mr. Anderson? I know the board has spent a lot of time, whether it's at our study sessions, again, going all the way back to April of '21, or our regular monthly meetings at our retreat, in addition to what Kevin shared as far as the levels of engagement and re-engagement as we've kind of moved dates and kind of moved things around. But again, thank you for your work as a board, diving in and looking intently at this, along with Mr. Anderson, Ms. Sullivan, and others I know. The other thing that I think is critically important, and Kevin mentioned this, is those assessments that follow. That's really where we're able to identify the needs at the building level, then tied to our demographic projections, to be able to assess elementary, middle, and high school what those specifics are that are needed at every single campus. So that's a lot of work in and of itself. So.
Well, I appreciate Steve and your team finding new ways to engage the community and other stakeholders, right, to gather additional information, and for the community being willing to participate in this, because we don't get here without that, and it's a key and important part of the whole process.
And it's a lot of information.
It's a lot of good information.
Question, and maybe it's for Steve. I looked at this repurposing. There was a comment, I guess that's from the demographer, about, except for the high school, if my memory serves me right, Liberty North and Liberty High School, they described it as the environment's being supportive. The staff in the other schools pretty much said that there was a need for repurposing. Do you recall that?
Unfortunately, no. I don't know, Kim, does that jump out at you? Was it
Yeah.
part of the staff,
my-
engagement survey?
I'm trying to remember what that might have been.
My question is, so their input is there, and so we're going to look at, I mean, Liberty North and Liberty High have had repurposing done. I mean, what's the section called, 500 or 900?
Oh, the 800.
800,
You see
okay,
fine arts,
number,
yeah,
okay.
You're right, that was repurposed, and we have done several discussions. You know, Heritage is an example of repurposing some of those locker commons that aren't used and some of those other spaces. So that would be one example of what's in the plan for repurposing space.
I mean, I'm glad that the teachers or staff are being heard, you know, that's it, because they're the ones that, they use that along with the students.
And I think, and then to add to that, assuming this would all move forward, we do put a bond together. There's so much work to be done in detail and design, and that's where we engage again pretty aggressively, the staff and team and leadership at the building to help with the details of what the projects would look like.
Okay, thank you.
Additional comments, questions?
I move the board approve the 2022 Facilities Master Plan.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Into the April 23, no tax
Thank you.
increase bond issue resolution. Yes, thank you.
So then the next two items are associated, as Mr. Anderson mentioned. And so you have ballot language for your consideration. The first item being April 2023 no tax increase bond issue resolution. In doing our due diligence, we worked with our legal team in terms of looking at the language to provide that for you for your consideration this evening, and we're informed the need to read it into record as it relates to considered motion language. So,
I'll read.
as mentioned, we've spent quite a bit of time looking at this as it relates to a no tax increase bond issue. We kind of looked at the range of how much we could do in terms of our debt capacity over in Fund 3. And as it's designed and as the language reflects, really looking at $120 million, $100 million of which would then allow us to get through many of the projects that were identified through the facility master planning process. not all of them, but certainly pretty deep into those projects. The second piece is the $20 million then that would be kind of refinanced in respect to moving that around into our debt service fund that then would free up additional budget revenues in terms of allowing us to be able to have some flexibility in how that's utilized. So appreciate Cindy Sullivan in working on that, but the total package being $120 million for consideration that then is reflected in the ballot language for your consideration this evening.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, it appears that there's some changes that have been made to the ballot language here based on the pretty in-depth conversation that we had at the study session as well. Is that?
The ballot language should be exactly as it was we presented at the study session.
Seems like it's different. I like it.
Yeah, I had the same thought, Kimberly, but
There were a couple drafts that we had looked at with the recommended language. So I think there were 2 or 3 that we looked at the time, but
no changes since
The study session.
We dove in pretty deeply there.
Yep.
So do you want the action followed by the public comment?
Sorry. Cindy, the $20 million that we're going to retire opens up how much again roughly for operations?
$2.5 million a year.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Denise, what is, we read
The action and the public comment content?
Yes.
Okay, ready?
yes.
I move the board adopt the resolution calling an election on the question of issuance of general obligation bonds in Liberty 53 School District. Resolution calling an election on the question of issuance of general obligation bonds in Liberty 53 School District. Be it resolved by the Board of Education of Liberty, do we have to do this all the time? 53 School District as follows. Section 1, the Board of Education finds it necessary and hereby declares its intent to borrow $120 million for the purpose of constructing, improving, repairing, renovating, furnishing, equipping, and acquiring new and existing district facilities and related sites in order to increase efficiencies and make enhancements related to safety, security, accessibility, and student learning, and to acquire school facilities currently leased by the district, the project, and to evidence such borrowing by the issuance of general obligation bonds, the bonds, of Liberty 53 School District, the district, in the amount of $120 million. Section 2, an election is hereby ordered to be held in the district on Tuesday, April 4, 2023, on the following question. Question number 1, shall Liberty 53 School District issue its general obligation bonds in the amount of $120 million, estimated to result in no increase to the district's debt service property tax levy for the purpose of constructing, improving, repairing, renovating, furnishing, equipping, and acquiring new and existing district facilities and related sites in order to increase efficiencies and make enhancements related to safety, security, accessibility, and student learning, and to acquire school facilities currently leased by the district. If this question is approved, the district's debt service tax levy is estimated to remain unchanged at $1.5400 per 100 of assessed.
Gotta send you back.
Yeah.
Go back.
577.
Per $100 of assessed valuation of real and personal property. All right. The authorization of the bonds will authorize the levy and collection of an annual tax in addition to the other taxes provided for by law on all taxable tangible property in the district sufficient to pay the interest and principal of the bonds as they fall due. Section 3, the form of notice of election showing said question, a copy of which is attached hereto and made a part hereof, is hereby approved. Section 4, the Secretary of the Board of Education is hereby authorized and directed to notify the Clay County Board of Election Commissioners of the adoption of this resolution no later than 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 24, 2023, and to include in said notification all of the terms and provisions required by Chapter 115 RSMO as amended. Section 5, the district expects to make expenditure on and after the date of adoption of this resolution in connection with the project, and the district intends to reimburse itself for such expenditures with the proceeds of the bonds. The maximum principal amount of bonds expected to be issued for the project is $120 million. Section 6, the district hereby selects the firm of Stiefel, Nicholas and Company, Incorporated, Kansas City, Missouri, as underwriter of the bonds, and the firm of Gilmore and Bell, P.C., Kansas City, Missouri, as bond counsel. Section 7, the officers and representatives of the district are hereby authorized and directed to take such other actions as may be necessary in connection with calling an election for the issuance of bonds, including execution of a letter from Stiefel, Nicholas and Company, Incorporated, acknowledging the receipt by the district of certain disclosures regarding the role of such firm and other matters relating to an underwriting of bonds as required by Municipal Securities Rulemaking Board Rule G17. Section 8, the resolution shall be in full force and effect from and after its adoption.
Second.
The second seems so insignificant.
As well as.
Can I just say, I did quickly go back and confirm, maybe a little nervous there, it is the same language that was presented.
It is.
It
Okay.
is.
All right. I remembered it differently.
Thank
you.
you. I'm not writing that again.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
motion carries.
I'm going to read the next one too.
Really?
It's shorter. It's much easier.
Up to you. Moving into the April 23 debt service levy transfer resolution.
So part 2, for your consideration then, reflects the discussion we've had as well in and around that debt service levy transfer. You will recall when we gathered on December 5th, we ran through some scenarios from 30 cents all the way to, I believe, 89 cents. And our ability to move up to that much out of debt service into operating that then would generate coinciding revenues. And so where we landed in that range was really on 50 cents. And that if we were to approve ballot language to be filed in January and then place that item on the ballot in April, and voters then approved that, it would generate 50 cents of a move from debt service over to operating in Fund 1, around $7,900,000 that then can be used to the various aspects that are contained within that ballot language. So again, you have the recommended motion language followed by the resolution and doing our due diligence and reading that into the record for your consideration.
And Cindy, you're comfortable with the 50 cents?
I am.
Okay.
No tax increase. This is simply taking dollars we have today out of debt service, moving them into more of an operations focus.
That's correct. So your overall tax rate remains the same. As a reminder, we end up with 3 tax rates. We have our operating, we have our debt service, and then we have our capital tax rate that again is set every August as it relates to that. This also continues to keep us positioned to be able to bring further no tax levy increase bond issues up for consideration. And really doesn't negatively impact our ability in terms of our debt capacity in our Fund 3. You all are to credit for that. In previous restructuring that was done by the Board of Education that then financially has set us up to where we are presently in bringing that no tax increase bond issue forward for consideration, but then also that ability to move up to the 50 cents we're recommending from debt service over to our operating fund.
Ready?
And this question was, I guess go back to Kim Marie's question, was there any changes made here? I know that we
had some conversations.
We had some conversation on this one, but, and yeah. I think we left it with, we got to let the experts who write it, and we'll have to accept it. I guess my feeling is that in the first question, the fact that there's no expected change is quite clear. This one, right. You've got to read 3 lines before you get to the, and the district, it remains changed. But I guess that's
And that language was vetted
Yeah.
with counsel, with
It
legal
just seems
counsel.
not quite
As well as similar
upfront.
language that's been used in other districts that have placed a similar item on the ballot.
Yeah.
So anything to add, Cindy or Steve, in that respect?
No, well, yes. Yes. To your point, we did talk about
Yeah.
several options to this, and I think where we landed was to leave it as it was, to your
Yeah.
point, the way it was specified, and legal did approve that, and that's how it has
That's
to
how it
be.
has to go.
Yeah.
Okay.
Preference would be it just leads with, there's no
Big
increase
bold.
in taxes.
Big
Right.
bold.
Correct.
Which we'll all be messaging, right?
That they can. Informative.
Have a picky part.
Can we just ask for it to be yellow highlighted?
You can ask Dan.
On every single ballot.
You ask and let us know.
Angie will sign up to do it.
Okay, I'll highlight. I move the board adopt the resolution calling an election on an operating tax levy question in Liberty 53 School District. Resolution calling an election of an operating tax levy question in Liberty 53 School District. Be it resolved by the Board of Education of Liberty 53 School District as follows. Section 1, an election is hereby ordered to be held in the district on Tuesday, April 4, 2023, on the following question. Question number 2. Shall the Board of Education of Liberty 53 School District be authorized to increase the operating tax levy calling to $4.88 per
Ceiling.
Gotta take you back.
Oh, I forgot the ceiling. Tax levy ceiling to $4.88 per 100 of assessed valuation according to the 2023 assessment for capital improvements and general operating expenses of the district, including increasing compensation for employees to attract and retain quality faculty and staff. If this question is approved, the operating tax levy of the district is estimated to increase by 50 cents per $100 of assessed valuation, and the district, I thought there was some, expects to make a corresponding reduction to its debt service tax levy in the same amount, resulting in the estimated overall tax levy of the district to remain unchanged. Section 2, the form of notice of election showing said question, a copy of which is attached hereto and made a part hereof, is hereby approved. Section 3, the Secretary of the Board of Education is hereby authorized and directed to notify the Clay County Board of Election Commissioners of the adoption of this resolution no later than 5 p.m. on Tuesday, January 24, 2023, and to include in said notification all of the terms and provisions required by Chapter 115 RSMO as amended. Section 4, this resolution shall be in full force and effect from and after its adoption.
Second.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
motion carries.
Thank you to everybody on your work on putting all that together. 5.04 legislative priorities.
Another item that the board has been working on for some time. You have presented to you this evening a revision of a previously approved set of legislative priorities. So thank you for your input on that. Following your consideration, we will then get to work in respect to communicating this out in advance of our legislative session. So would present those revisions to you for consideration.
Questions or comments on the legislative priorities as revised?
I'll read it. I move the board adopt the 2023 legislative priorities as revised.
Second.
And Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan,
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew,
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Angie,
Yes.
Nick,
Yes.
motion carries.
All right, 505, secondary course proposals.
So this is brought to you this evening for second read in your consideration for action. As a reminder, we presented to you several courses at the secondary level: digital photo, art and design, college debate, Thrive 101, advanced digital photo, and advanced studio art would be removed from our courses. So with that, anything else to add, Dr. Moore, as it relates to these course proposals? We'll then just present those to you for your consideration this evening.
No changes.
I move the board approve digital photo, art and design, college debate, Thrive 101, and advanced digital photo course proposals and the removal of advanced studio art.
Second.
Denise, were you ready?
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
And moving into 23-24 academic calendars.
This item is an item that we've also visited earlier this fall semester, and this is presented to you as an information or first read item. You have two calendars within your board docs this evening. The first is our Liberty Public Schools 23-24 academic calendar. We looked at several options of the calendar with Team Liberty. Appreciate their work. Highlight a couple dates. August 23rd would be our first day of school. The end of the first semester would be December 21st, with our winter break commencing December 22nd and running through January 2nd. Teacher workday on January 3rd, with students returning on January 4th. Fast forward then to spring break, that being the week of March 25th through the 29th. And then the last day of classes would be on May 22nd. The last time we brought this to you, we were looking at coordinating with other districts across the Northland in common programming that we all send students to: Northland Career Center, Excelsior Springs Career Center, KC Tech Academy, Northland CAPS program. And so we're still working to finalize and coordinate that, but we'll bring this back to you in the month of January for your consideration. The second calendar then is the EPIC calendar, which starts slightly earlier. First day of school for EPIC for the 23-24 school year would be August 9th. And then end of semester lines up with the district on December 21st, with winter vacation being December 22nd through January 2nd. Similar teacher workday, same spring break, but then their tentative last day, as they start earlier and end later, would be June 7th. So we'd present those two calendars to you this evening just for first read. And then again, as you take a look at that, if you have questions or other thoughts, please let us know. Otherwise, we'll bring that back to you for final action at our January regular monthly board meeting.
Is there any consensus emerging yet from the other folks that you're checking with?
They are lining up more with ours in respect to that third week.
Okay.
In terms of that spring break date. Some of them were earlier, but then as we got out in our calendars a little bit earlier, they've started moving to be in line with us. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Good.
So are we a trendsetter?
Sort of, I guess. I guess we got at it a little sooner than some other districts in terms of starting that conversation. But again, we look at multiple scenarios as far as calendar drafts. Of course, a lot of the headlines got lately were in regard to independence and what they're doing with their calendars in school and so forth. But I think the rest of us are staying steady with a 5-day week and looking forward to next year's academic calendars. So, okay.
Into new business, starting with the Return to Learn plan.
So we do have a modified Return to Learn plan. We'll turn it over to Mr. Anderson to walk us through that
Fifth
particular
addendum?
item.
Fifth addendum.
Is that all?
First was approved in August of 20, if you remember back then. Yeah, so real brief, this is basically trying to catch up and in planning and thinking ahead to next semester and maybe even going forward past that. And the changes in this version are pretty minor. The main change that I think will both will sense is we're going to move away from the dashboard and the notification process that we currently have in place. As I've mentioned before, the data and the reporting systems are starting to all kind of wash out now too, with flu and other things going on. So it's just really not as valid and it's not as relevant, to be really honest. So we're pulling that out of the plan. Masks and test kits we still have, so we'll continue to make those available as long as we have them available Apart from that, the changes are very minor, just cleanup items, and would appreciate approval of that, and we would message that out to the community.
To connect back to some comments from Mr. Enoson's earlier operations report and the number of school nurse visits that occur on a monthly basis, another piece that is often unseen is the reporting of data in those nursing visits to our health department. It's referred to as syndromic surveillance. That occurred prior to the pandemic, throughout the pandemic, will continue to occur, particularly right now as we're monitoring the flu, as well as RSV and some COVID cases that continue to persist. So all that being said, the due diligence on the front end with our nurse visits that then informs the health department as to what we're seeing in our schools. So that's a critical piece that was there prior to the pandemic, but then also that piece will continue.
And is it, I guess, goes without saying, I guess, that this is about the pandemic? Because it seems like there's a couple of places where I'm like, why not insert RSV right there?
Sure.
Why not insert flu right there? I mean, because all these same things, or a lot of them, you would, and my understanding of the hospitals and things in the area is that it's tied to kind of the whole pool, not just COVID-19, but yet this plan is really just COVID-19.
Right.
Which itself, I guess you can get into discussion of whether we're dealing with COVID-19 or COVID something else.
Sure.
At this point. I just wonder, it just seems like there's a point where it starts to become overcome by events, doesn't it? And that we need to acknowledge that there's things out there we want to prepare for and guard against what we know, but this seems to be continue to be very tightly focused.
And I think it is, absolutely, and that's why we have that plan, the first iteration of it, all the way till now. The other thing that people forget is the pre-pandemic planning that existed already in dealing with infectious disease, right? In that we would periodically deal with measles. And we would message and we would communicate and work with our health department in that respect. So those plans don't go away. Those procedures and policies still are in place regardless of what replaces it, whether it's SARS or whether it's some other infectious disease we've not quite thought of. So those structures are still in place and coordinating with the health department and how we move forward. Knock on wood, it's our hope that this ends up being our last addendum as it relates to return to learn. But needless to say, if we find ourselves in a different spot in January or February because of a strain of the flu or RSV continuing to persist or something completely different, we would be back at the board level communicating the data, then also coordinating with our health departments as to how to move forward. Anything to add to that, Steve?
Yeah, I would agree. Ultimately, I would just add, this feels like a little bit of a book that we've been writing, and this is chapter 6 with 5 addendums onto the original, and we had to conclude it. So hopefully, that's the sense that we have. But without ending it in some fashion or kind of allowing us to run forward without some of the other things that were in place, we felt it was necessary to do just that.
And I guess that leads to my next, is there a criteria to sunset this? I mean, if this is to be the final addendum, what is it that triggers or allows us to say it's done?
I think that could be something that could be discussed down the line as things continue to unfold. I think that the thing, we wrote this very intentionally to know that there is nothing in here that should cause anybody any grief kind of rolling forward just as is, wherever you sit in it. It's just kind of this is how the lay of the land going forward. So I think it's fine to leave it as is without a sunset, but certainly if that's something we wanted to do down the road a little bit, we could certainly terminate it, I guess, but. Yeah.
I'm trying to think. The measles, I mean, you mentioned measles, and there's MSBA policy on that. Isn't that written into MSBA? I'm trying to remember, but it seems like because there's not a specific policy, this is kind of a gap filler for us in a way. So unless there's something that's required to be specific, it's a way to just kind of have something that lives as our statement of how to respond in the interim, I guess?
We've got communicable disease policies, which would be a overarching for everything. But, I mean, we had requirements to have a return to learn plan in place.
Mhm.
And so part of this is just being consistent with that, and we're communicating what we're doing now, which is doing away with the dashboard and letting people know about it. So, I mean, I think that the genesis of it was we had a requirement that we had to do it. And maybe this is the sunset, and maybe that requirement won't happen next year, but at least it's consistently communicating to the public what we're doing. So, I mean, that's my thought on it.
I think one of the things we can draw from this is that we have strategies and information that can help us in the future. And so I think that's the message we take away from this, is that we have followed a plan. And so therefore, we've got something to start off with. We don't have to start fresh. So I think it's very important that we continue to be aware of what's going on.
I think the two things that stand out to me, Steve, and keep me honest here with the prior addendum is we're no longer contact tracing. And I think that has to be called out because
Been a while.
people are like, well, am I getting it, am I not getting it, whatever. Okay, no, we're done. And then, the social distancing one, I think also, there's no call for it.
Right.
So that's a change, so there's no enforcement of it, just so people understand, you walk into the buildings now, kids are in the buildings, this is what they need to be expecting. And so we're, to your point, somewhat sunsetting that fourth addendum and saying this is where we're at.
Right, and the fourth addendum included, we started us off in the distancing, and we moved away from the contact tracing with the most recent one, correct?
And there's a fairly significant change in that we're not going to be identifying close contacts and notifying, right? So
courtesy notice.
Right. I mean,
That's right.
I received one of those last week. So
Yeah.
we're just making people aware, and that's just transparency.
Just as a quick reminder, if you'll remember a year ago this month, we were, sorry,
Yes.
people forget about this. But we were at this meeting having the conversation to mask, not to mask, and we stepped out in an effort to unmask. And then shortly, when we came back in January, our numbers ticked up, and then we brought it back in place for a little while. Steve and I were talking about that earlier last week, and we had both kind of forgotten about that. But that wasn't that long ago. So
The whole year.
Seems longer.
Yeah,
than,
sorry.
Longer than a year ago.
Apologies. It does, doesn't it?
I move the board approve the return to learn plan, fifth addendum, to be effective January 1st, 2023.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Somewhat of a sister.
A companion piece, yeah. A companion piece to that is 6.02 and the COVID leave that we had put in place for our staff as it relates to additional days of leave in and around COVID or illness. And so we had had some conversations about that particular item, and we're bringing the recommendation this evening to be able to extend that through June 30th, 2023, that then continues that leave available to our staff as it relates to them using it as needed in and around COVID-19. So we'd present that to you for your consideration this evening.
And we are still seeing employees leverage this, is that right?
Yes, we are.
Correct.
I move the board adopt the updated COVID-19 leave resolution with an expiration date of June 30th, 2023.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ?
Yes.
Dan?
Yes.
Kim Marie?
Yes.
Drew?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Angie?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Into weighted grades.
A conversation that we've had off and on over the years as it relates to high school courses and weighting as far as honors courses or weighted grades in and around high school, and how that is transcribed, but then also how that is transferred onto institutions of higher education. One of the things we have learned recently, and Dr. Moore will walk us through this, is students that are either at an advantage or a disadvantage when it comes to scholarships and requirements to be able to apply for those scholarships. In some instances in which a weighted GPA gets you in the door as compared to not having a weighted GPA. And so we've done some research over the course of this fall and have brought a recommendation to you this evening that is presented to you for first read, that then will be brought back in the month of January. We're going to continue to do some further study, but in thinking about this year's seniors, might we be able to set a side-by-side GPA in terms of a 4.0 next to a weighted scale that then allows them to be able to include that information when applying for a scholarship or an application for college, but then not making it fully effective until later on for a future class as it relates to class ranking and so forth. So we'll turn it over to Dr. Moore to walk us through that this evening.
He just gave my whole presentation.
That was the summary.
I am good.
You're going to go into detail.
So this has been a conversation since I've been in this role and as executive director of secondary, so for 6 years now, and I know that it was a discussion prior to me with the people who preceded me. So we really thought at the time, as we've gone through, when we've had parents ask, we've said, the conversation was that it really doesn't put LPS students at a disadvantage for us to just go on a 4.0 scale. So recently we had a parent reach out and we started to dig in a little more. We started to call colleges and universities, particularly to where a lot of our students go, and just said, what is the difference? Like if a student has a 4.0 versus a weighted, is there a difference in scholarship money? And they said, absolutely. If we had a weighted GPA, that could potentially give students more money for that. So for that reason, we feel it would be best to add the GPA points to specific courses starting this year. What we would like to do is to really go through and retroactively for the students this year mark AP courses, dual credit, and early college courses in a way that provide the additional points for a weighted grade. Then on their transcript, we would give them the regular GPA on a 4.0 scale, and then we would also provide the weighted GPA so that when they apply to schools or they go to apply for more scholarships, then that is present for them to assist. So our goal really is to do that starting this year, and then as we go into the timeline, we will, I'm going to go to that, is that we would really start looking at it right now, provide that for students, and then in the spring we would really start looking to the class of 2027, which is crazy, but that's our current 8th graders, so that as they are getting ready to start looking at classes that they want to take, that they can make decisions based on knowing which ones would be which ones would provide more weight to them. So going back, I think I mentioned this at the board study session, but we did, in our research, we looked at 7 districts around us, and you can see them all listed. They all use a weighted GPA structure. We didn't get into specifics with them of which courses they use, but we do know that they use it, and so we would like to then kind of dig in a little bit more to the courses that we offer students and determine which ones should be considered weighted and which ones should not. So that is a proposal moving forward. I think I skipped over this, but kind of the same thing. The weighted GPA, if we did a study group this spring, then we would come back to you with an additional proposal that would say these are the courses that we would like to weight in addition to what we would do just for the 4 years that we are currently in, if that makes sense. Any questions on that? Dr. Tucker really did a nice job of summarizing it. So,
well, and there is some bridging until you get that full freshman class through the class of 2027, which is not uncharacteristic of when we roll these out. You can't just necessarily make it effective for the entirety in all systems, for the seniors or juniors or sophomores, because you want those incoming freshmen to be fully informed so that informs their course selection. At the same time, though, we don't want our current seniors to be at a disadvantage entering into that scholarshiping window so that they can see the side-by-side. It wasn't enough for us just to communicate in one particular instance to the higher ed institution that, hey, this is what it would have been for that student, and us being willing to put it in writing. They wanted to see it on the transcript. So thus the bridge until we get to that fully integrated class of 2027.
if you think of the tiered diploma that we had approved 2 years ago. That was marked for the class of 2025, so that it was those 8th graders at the time who are now our sophomores. And so they were able to know going into high school that these are the things that I need to be able to do. I have the opportunity to choose one of 3 diplomas, and so that would be the same here, is that as 8th graders are picking classes, that they know that these are classes that might give me the extra advantage. The other piece is obviously it's our goal for all students to take more rigorous courses and challenge themselves, so that we think that this would be an opportunity for students to maybe think a little bit outside of the norm. There's argument both ways of students might take easier courses to protect their GPA, but if they know that they can take a more rigorous course and get the extra half point for it, then that's going to help them in the long run.
So if we were to approve this, immediately students would have a weighted and
Yes.
Would have a weighted and unweighted GPA through this semester, right?
Correct. So we have it ready to go in Power School. Dr. Soluri.
So it is immediate then.
It is immediate. He is
the blink of an
pretty
eye.
genius when it comes to this. So he has it ready to go. We did a prototype with a couple of students at North in Liberty High School, and then the student whose parent we were working with, because we wanted to provide that to her university right away. And so we did that with a couple of students, and we were able to see in one case a student who had around a 3.9 GPA, but because of the AP courses she had taken, I think it took her up to like a 4.167. So it provided both on the transcript. It said, unweighted and then weighted. And then the other piece, obviously, I just want to stress that would be immediate, and then but it would not change any student's status as far as if they are currently a junior and they have a 4.0. It's not going to change anything for next year if they're working toward valedictorian or salutatorian. We would not want to penalize students, hence waiting until this 8th grade class.
Okay.
So is that something that is a given, or is that something that a student has to request?
It would be a given.
Okay.
Moving forward, this year, if it is approved, we would just go ahead and put it on every student's transcript, so that when they when they submit those, that a college can see it and they don't have to come back and ask for it.
Okay.
So as Dr. Tucker mentioned, with this other student, we wrote a letter to the university. Dr. Soluri and I wrote a letter, submitted it on the student's behalf, and said if we had a weighted grade system, she would have a 4.12 or whatever it was, and the university came back and said we want to accept this. It needs to be on the transcript, and we need to see it with the courses. So we went ahead and did it to provide that to the student, and then thought, well, we do this for one student, we should be doing this for every student, because it is it's that easy to get it on there.
That's amazing.
The other thing on the front end, for some of those higher level courses, we've been working the last couple of years to really kind of rethink the qualifications to get into the class as far as the prerequisites. That then has caused us to be able to open up greater access to those courses, or identifying ways to embed dual credit in other programming, like like AVID or some of those other programs that we have in place. The idea being, as Dr. Moore shared, let's get kids into some of these more advanced, higher level courses, weighted courses, that then gives them that opportunity. And rather than just it being a select group, or just your gifted kids, for example. So we're excited about that as well.
For my own education, there's a standard weighting process of AP dual credit over the college. I mean, all schools do it similarly, or all districts do it similarly.
For those courses, yes. I mean, I think that all AP dual credit, if they have an early college program, they would do it. And then you'd have to just look at some of your other college level courses that you might want to incorporate into there. We have some PLTW courses that we could look at to make an argument. That's where I think the study team has to come in, and we have to involve counselors and maybe some department chairs from the high school to say what other courses might we consider.
Okay.
So that's really the question that I have. I'm super excited about this, because this has been something I've been kind of concerned about for a while. and we have some examples of places where we wouldn't give weighting for advanced and honors classes, but it seems like there are some other classes where it's pretty clear, especially math and science, where there's a regular course and there was a more rigorous course. And my question is, why wouldn't we, if it's clear, why wouldn't we just go ahead and do that right away?
We could.
I mean, it just feels like...
And we could, if we start
it's all
in
kind of
the
the same.
spring, we can always, again, retroactively look at some of those and adding them. We would want to do it sooner rather than later as students apply to have those on there. But we could scoop that timeline up a little bit to look at some of those for sure.
It just seems like there are some that are pretty clear. Right. There's a difference.
These seemed like very, knowing that all districts do these, so it was easy to say, if we just start with this and add that weighted GPA, then we know we have an idea of how that would impact students. And in the event, I think of the example I shared, it was a difference between $40-some thousand and $60,000, quite a bit for a family.
This may be unavoidable, but I'm trying to think through, and I will say I'm very surprised moving into the district that we didn't already do this when we moved here. I just thought everybody did weighted grading, but so I am very excited about this. I'm trying to think about these classes that would be, especially I guess seniors this year, thinking about, you mentioned financial aid from colleges, and it sounds like awards would go up. Are there situations where our students might be competing against each other for like a community scholarship, for example, and this changes the game a little bit in terms of what the transcript looks like, maybe from what that student had going in, and how do we think about that? Like, I mean, I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just thinking about how do we maybe that's something we think about as far as.
And I think a lot of that stems from the scholarshiping entity.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have any influence on that, control over that or not? So then is it really kind of the academic performance-based scholarship, which really is just looking at that, high GPA, or is it really more of a needs-based piece? And oftentimes it's a combination of the two.
Right.
Right. So I think all of that factors into that criteria. The interesting piece about this, and starting with where we are, is that based on the courses that students have selected to take, your GPA is your GPA. Fold in the weighted piece, your GPA only improves from this standpoint.
Right, it only improves for that person. I'm thinking about the student that maybe can argue, I would have taken a weighted class.
Sure.
And I'm just trying to think about.
Yeah. And that's where you can either wait and do that fully with that incoming 8th grade class, but we felt the need to really focus on those students that aren't the class of 2027, so as to be able to give them that leg up too.
Right.
I do understand kind of that internal piece where
right.
He took some weighted classes and I didn't, and we're competing for that same scholarship. Right. The other piece to that, though, as you ferret through those courses taken, you see pretty quickly the rigor as compared to
I'm sure probably a scholarship committee would see looking at the courses names anyway.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking through it, like, I mean, I definitely think that we want to reward students that are taking the more challenging coursework, and so I just want to make sure we were.
Absolutely.
So
with the proposal, I know this is an information discussion. It sounds like we've got some passion for this, if you will. What are the next steps on this?
So then for action in January, that then would make that retroactive for our existing seniors and then juniors and sophomores, as well as this year's freshmen, right?
Yeah.
That will be sophomores for next year. And then study over the course of the spring, as Dr. Moore has kind of outlined, but then everything really fully beginning for that class of 27 or this year's 8th graders. Of course, with that comes onboarding of students, parent information nights and meetings and so forth, changes to handbooks and all of the implications that follow. Certainly between now and the January board meeting, questions, thoughts, considerations, please push those our way. We'll have an opportunity at our study session in January if we want to go deeper, but then certainly when we come back together at our January meeting.
So I guess I would ask the question, is this potentially precluding some students by not having quicker action, right? I mean, a study session, if you will, from going after particular financial aid and missing out, or are we accommodating that?
January is okay. I mean, if we were able to do a study session, it would be more ideal because that's 2 weeks earlier.
Okay. Okay.
The deadline for most college applications is January 15th.
Okay.
As a reference.
But not necessarily, not necessarily the
Not that
scholarship.
you're in the middle of that.
No,
The
some
college
of them
applications.
come without anything additional, so.
The quicker the better is what
The quicker the better.
Yep.
Yeah, and as I said, it's ready to go.
Yep.
So we would be able to provide that.
Button push.
Right.
Got it.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Moore.
Okay. Board policy revisions. Look at all those things.
So you have 3 categories of items this evening. The first of which are policies that are to be reviewed. Appreciate MSBA for pushing this update to us. We have been sharing these policies with our cabinet and other leaders for their review to make sure that they line up with the work that we do in district. That also includes administrative procedures, which, as a reminder, we share those with you for informational purposes only. Action is not required on those items. Then you also have a third element, and that is one particular policy to be rescinded, and that is DBB. All it entails is some clarity or definitions around our fiscal year, indicating that it is July 1 through June 30 as far as those dates, aligning with kind of the financial world and how they run their fiscal years. That is then moved to Board Policy DB and is contained, that same information is contained in DB, which is in reference to our annual budget. So the only motion language that is presented this evening is to rescind Policy DBB, and then we'll follow in January with that item being included and that language being included in Policy DB when we get to that point in January.
I should have caught this earlier. If we rescind DBB without DB being approved, do we not have a definition of a fiscal year until DB is
We're living dangerously.
That is a technicality, yes.
Can we live
Was there any
dangerously like
guidance
that,
from
Cindy?
MSBA on that, Denise?
No, there was not.
Okay, so if
Not
you
that I'm
would
aware of.
prefer, we can hold to ensure that we have clarity around our current fiscal year.
I mean, how would we even know what a month is if we don't have a definition of fiscal year in our policy?
policy to tell us. I don't care. I'm just bored.
I serve at the pleasure of the board.
I mean, yeah, I'd go either way. I mean, it doesn't make any, I mean, we could just wait. If we're waiting to adopt the revisions next month,
That's right.
Let's just wait.
let's just wait, I think. And we'll do it all.
That sounds
And we'll
good.
do the sleight of hand.
Make a note of that.
It's 8:54, so not that anybody.
Given how many policies there are to review, I'm surprised that we didn't get direction from the legislature on this rescinding
On
and
that
adding
particular
as
item.
well.
There you go.
All right. We don't need a motion for that, right? Or do we?
We'll hold on that.
No? Great. 605, contracts, purchases, and bids.
We do have a few items, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Anderson to walk us through those.
There are 4 items under policy DJF-1, emergency expedited purchases and actions that have been taken over the past few months. The first being we worked through Amazon to make a bulk purchase for paper product. We had an opportunity there to move quickly and save some money by buying in bulk, so we moved on that. Second is Sunbelt Rentals. This is for winterizing irrigation systems throughout the district, so we rented equipment to do that. We also had to bring in train to repair a compressor at South Valley Middle School. And last, we had Zipco Contracting come in kind of late summer into fall and do work at Epic, Liberty North, and Support Services. They had some water damage. And the reason for the lag, just as a good reminder to that, so we moved quickly at the time and updated you all that we were moving forward with them. It's just as the paperwork and processing, and this is when we finally knew the final contract amounts for all that work, and so that's why it's now in front of you. I'm happy to take any questions.
July 15th, Friday update, you expect, I'm so glad you put that on there so we would remember where to look.
Any questions?
Paper is so darn expensive.
We use a lot of it.
Can we do away with paper and just go digital?
Study session.
I move the board approve the emergency purchases actions as listed.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Kim Marie,
Yes.
Drew.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes.
Angie.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Into section 7, starting with legislation and advocacy. Angie, either?
There are two things. One is they are starting to look at training for people who oversee the delegates to the assemblies, which would be really nice for the assembly delegates to know what they're doing when they get there. And then MSBA is beginning a group to rework the crazy superintendent evaluation process that is currently in the state, which I think we started that discussion at the conference in November. And right now it's slotted to take place starting in January through next fall. I mean, it's a long process to look at that.
A lot of input.
That's what they've asked for.
Thank you for that. Upcoming meetings, just note, board candidate filing coming to a close here, December 27th at 5 p.m. And we will kick off the new year right with a study session on January 3rd at 7 a.m. Anything for board remarks?
Thanks to Jackson for being here again. We're glad you're back.
I'll just say thanks to everybody for another great semester as we come to a close. I know this is probably, if we want to put normal in quotes, we'll put it in quotes, but it's been good to get back. Hope everybody has a great holiday, enjoys time with family, friends, relaxes, gets back at it. That includes students as well. I know mine are excited to be off for a little break, so thanks to everybody watching at home and across the globe. Okay, if nothing further.
I move the board adjourn.
Second.
Denise, when you're ready.
Pick whoever you want.
AJ,
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Kim Marie.
Yes.
Drew.
Yes.
Karen.
Yes, ma'am.
Angie.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.